Evan Mazza back at it with you here tonight on a big breaking news episode of Mazza on Sports. A lot we have to get into tonight as the Baltimore Ravens announced that they have fired head coach John Harbaugh after 18 seasons. After on Sunday, they season ended on a yet another big game, heartbreaking loss. This time to the Pittsburgh Steelers on Sunday, 26-24. And the lasting image of that game was the missed game-winning field goal by Tyler Loop that went wide right, and that ended up being I guess it's a little weird, right? It's in the NFL or in sports in general. Uh, John, the last play of his Baltimore Ravens, run as head coach was on special teams, and unfortunately, it was the missed kick. But before we talk about obviously there's a lot to get into with the Ravens. There's so much to talk about with them tonight. They're the talk of the NFL world they've been the talk of the NFL world over the last 3 days because obviously after going into the game on Sunday, then after the loss, nobody knew what they were really going to do. No one really knew what the direction they were going to go in terms of head coach. There's obviously the questions about Lamar Jackson, his contract, and what's going to happen there. But obviously with the firing of Harbaugh tonight, they have set the NFL coaching carousel for a whirlwind. Teams have now completely went and said, "Oh, now we want Harbaugh. Like we thought we wanted you. Yeah, that John Harbaugh guy is now available." But obviously, we'll get into that in a bit. We do have to begin with the game on Sunday itself. The game on Sunday itself. Yet another tough. I guess this was again. When you watch the game on Sunday, we shouldn't be surprised that the Ravens Steve Bisciotti came to the decision. The owner of the team, Steve Bisciotti, came to the decision tonight to fire John Harbaugh, or at least earlier this afternoon. But at the game itself on Sunday, yet again, was a game where they didn't play a complete game. Offensively, Derrick Henry was great in the half. Derrick Henry was great by the half. He had well over 100 yards rushing at the half, but he was shut down really for the most part in the second half. But other than Derrick Henry, the Ravens offense was kind of asleep, was kind of non-existent for 3 quarters. They really didn't do much for 3 quarters. Lamar he did throw the touchdown early in the first quarter on the first drive of the game to Tez Walker wide open on third down, I think it was. But aside from that, he really didn't do much. He went into the fourth quarter, 60 yards passing, I think it was. Obviously, and the touchdown pass was 30 of those yards. And he threw an interception, a pass that was a little low, and it was deflected by, I believe it was Cam Hayward, and TJ Watt picked it off. That resulted in Steeler points. So the Ravens offense, aside from Derrick Henry for 3 quarters, really didn't do much. And the defense, on the other hand, for 3 quarters was pretty darn good. They had 2 terrific stops on 4th down, 4th and 1 on a tush push. And the Ravens were able to get a field goal on that one. And right before the half, they made a huge stop on 4th down to continue to stay up in the lead 10-3 at halftime. So the defense was great for 3 quarters. The offense wasn't for 3 quarters. And then in the 4th quarter, everything just went crazy. And before you know it, the offense, with around 8 minutes left in the quarter, down 13-10, all of a sudden started to really move the football and play to the capability that they're capable of playing it. And it started with Lamar Jackson making an incredible, one of the best touchdown passes, I think, of his career, avoiding 2 pass rushers and avoiding it and doing extra impressive when it was with a bad back. And he throws to a wide open Zay Flowers, who for some reason Patrick Queen was covering him. I don't know why Patrick Queen was covering Zay Flowers, but that's just me. But he throws it to a wide open Zay Flowers, and he catches that for a touchdown. But then this is where the defense starts to falter. They give up a long touchdown drive to Aaron Rodgers, and the Steelers retake the lead. The Ravens get the lead back on a 3rd down touchdown pass to a wide open Zay Flowers. And then so that was Lamar's second 50-yard touchdown pass of the day, his 3rd of the night overall. But again, first 3 quarters, he really struggled. But in the 4th quarter, he played probably the best 4th quarter, I think, of his entire career. But then the defense gave it up right back again after playing so great for 3 quarters. They gave it up right back, a wide open touchdown to Cal. I believe I'm trying to remember who caught the touchdown. I'll get it back. I'll get it back. But it was a wide open touchdown from Aaron Rodgers. I think Chidobe Awuzie slipped on the play. Steelers got the ball right back. So, the Steelers scored the touchdown, and then Chris Boswell misses the extra point, and Chris Boswell never misses kicks. He very rarely misses any kicks. He's probably the best kicker in all of football, but he misses that kick, and then it gives the Ravens new life. Instead of going in to kick a field goal to tie in overtime, they could kick the field goal and actually win this thing. And then on fourth down, and then on third down, on fourth down, 4th and 7, play before that, Lamar has a wide open DeAndre Hopkins, and the school day was kind of miscommunication between him and Hopkins. He's telling Hopkins to run. Hopkins doesn't know. Hopkins doesn't see. Hopkins maybe gotten the first down, or even Lamar could have taken off and ran, could have gone at least another 10, 15, 20 yards. But all of that came down to 4th down and 7. Lamar threw it up to Isaiah Likely, who we have been waiting to make plays like this, jumps up and makes the catch. These were the kind of plays that we were waiting Isaiah Likely to make. Isaiah Likely, we were all expecting him to make those kind of catches all season long, and we finally saw it on the biggest play of the season. So 4th down, 4th and 7, they get the big completion. I know there's a lot of controversy from Ravens fans, or even some, why didn't the Ravens run the football? Pittsburgh had no timeouts. You get a couple of extra yards, all that stuff. The Ravens had, I think, a timeout or 2, I believe. Well, again, it goes back to turnovers, right? I think that's the simple thing. If you give it to Derrick Henry or Lamar, whoever, obviously you're putting the ball in range. I mean, they got to about the 25 or so 30-yard line, and that still should be enough to make the field goal. Obviously, you're still trusting, granted he is a rookie kicker, you're still trusting a rookie kicker to make the field goal. But you also don't want to put the ball at risk. You don't want to fumble. I mean, you're in field goal range. You don't want the ball to come loose. You don't want to fumble. You don't want anything like that, or even a sack or a loss of yards. Heck, they could have given it to Derrick Henry. Maybe he lost a couple of yards, So I know it's a hindsight thing, and everyone's trying to question, say, hey, why didn't they do that? Why didn't they do that? Why did that? Obviously, because, again, with the end result, with Tyler Luke missing the field goal. But I can understand why. I mean, it's just basic 101. You get in the field goal range, you take the knee, right? Because you don't want to put the ball in danger. You don't want to fumble or anything like that. And, hey, if they did give it to Henry or Mitchell or Lamar, whoever, and they fumbled it, obviously then you say, wait a minute, that's stupid. Why would you give it the ball one more time, hand the ball off, instead of kick the field goal, taking a knee, kicking the field goal, right? It's a hindsight. The sports is such a hindsight game, but everything percentage-wise, everything tells you to take the knee there and kick the field goal. Obviously, that's let the clock go. You call a timeout, and you try to win the game there. Obviously, if Luke makes that field goal, we're not talking about taking the knee or whatever. But obviously, Luke goes in there. He says he just missed it. I think he said post-game hit like the tip of his toe. He knew he didn't get it, and it went right. And just like that, the season was over for the Baltimore Ravens as the Pittsburgh Steelers win the AFC North Division. The Ravens missed the playoffs for the first time since 2021, and it concludes I'll put a bow quickly on the Ravens season before moving on to Harbaugh. It was exactly how you would think the Ravens season would end. It was just the pinnacle of how this season went. I don't blame it on the kicker. I'm not going to put it all on the rookie kicker. This is a team that just never got going all season long. That's just it. They never got going all year long. This is a team with high Super Bowl aspirations, and we'll get to more about that, obviously, with Steve Bisciotti and his decision to move on to fire Harbaugh. But this was a team with high Super Bowl aspirations. They were supposed to not just make the Super Bowl, they were supposed to win the Super Bowl. They were supposed to be dominant. Everybody had them winning 12, 13, 14, gosh, even 15 games. And Lamar would win his 3rd MVP, and the Ravens would go to the Super, kind of cruise their way to the Super Bowl because they felt that this was their moment. This was their year. They had the best roster, best team on paper, all that stuff. They then got off to a 1-3 start. They blew the game at Buffalo against the Bills in week 1. And I just think from then on, I think that was the season right there. That loss to the Bills in week 1 when they blew that one, that was the season right there. That was it. They just never recovered from there. When they lost to Buffalo in week 1, they just never really recovered from there. It just felt like it. You can sense it after they lost. Even after they lost that game, just felt like they didn't recover from that. And it just felt like it was just in their heads throughout the entire season because they had another blown lead, another bad big game loss, and to a really good football team like the Bills. And I think it just stuck with them throughout the whole season. And then they started off 1-3, lost to Kansas City and Detroit. Kansas City, the Chiefs, they lose Lamar Jackson to a hamstring injury for a couple of weeks. They have to play Cooper Rush. They lose those 2 games with him at quarterback. So they go 1-5. So now they got to crawl their way back out of this 1-5, 1-3, 1-5 hole that they unfortunately dug themselves into after everything of Super Bowl aspirations, right? So, 1-3, 1-5, it's like, shoot, we're not even going to make the playoffs right now. Forget about the Super Bowl. What about the postseason? And then they end up winning a game with Tyler Huntley at quarterback. So Cooper Rush obviously doesn't work out. Tyler Huntley they do bring back, and he ends up performing well on 2 games, and we'll get to the next one. But they play the Bears. They're 1-5. Bears are a good team. They end up winning the NFC North. The Ravens really need this win. They really need this game. Tyler Huntley goes out there and wins the game. And they play well. Actually play, I think, maybe their best overall complete game of the season, just offensively and defensively against the Bears. They get Lamar back. They rack up 4 wins in a row after that against Miami, the Jets, the Vikings, and the Browns, in no particular order. But you could also tell by watching all those wins after Lamar came back that something wasn't right. There still was something amiss. The offense just wasn't clicking. And yes, they were beating some not so good teams, but the offense just wasn't clicking. Lamar just didn't look right. Of course not. Obviously, he's got a hamstring, so hamstrings are one of the trickiest injuries in sports. It was always going to be, it wasn't going to be smooth sailing, and you could just tell something was amiss. I was at that Jets game that they played at Edmonton Bank Stadium, and there were times where I felt the Jets might even win, but they just didn't look right, and Lamar didn't look right. They then played the Bengals on Thanksgiving after they beat the Jets, and they got humiliated. They were 6-5 coming in. They were still on a 5-game winning streak, even with kind of the struggles you were seeing. And they got embarrassed on Thanksgiving. 5 turnovers on offense, 4 fumbles, I think it was, too. Along with that, they got embarrassed on defense. They got embarrassed that day. And then the next week later, they drop a bad one to Pittsburgh. And then they come back and beat the Bengals 24-0. But then next week later against New England, Lamar gets hurt and he hurts his back. They lose that game to the Patriots. But then Tyler Huntley, credit to him, man. If I had to name a team MVP for the entire season, I think I would name it Tyler Huntley. If you really think about it, the Ravens aren't even close to being in the playoffs and playoff contention without Tyler Huntley winning the game against the Bears and then coming in Saturday against the Green Bay Packers. And yeah, Derrick Henry, of course, led the show. He was the show that day, over 200 plus rushing yards, 4 touchdowns. I know that. But Tyler Huntley came in there and still played a pretty good game. And he was able to, in Green Bay at night, and was able to keep the Ravens season going, at least give them a chance and keep it going. And then the Browns did them a favor. They beat the Steelers, and that set up Sunday's game. But you see what I'm talking about. Up and down, roller coaster, not really connect. They didn't play complete game. Like I said, I think there's maybe 1 or 2 games where I can say they played a complete game, both on offense and defense. There was too much inconsistency. The team just never really got going. I even listened to Marlon Humphrey's podcast that he put up today that they recorded yesterday. So, and he even felt the same way. Like they just didn't fully mesh all year long. Nothing just went, they couldn't put it together all season long. And I think it's very much like the Mets in 2025. They just couldn't put it together, even with all the championship aspirations. The Ravens were the same thing. They just couldn't put it together. And you add all that up, not playing complete games, defense being inconsistent, offense not being at their best, the quarterback having a tough season. You the 1-3, 1-5 start. You put all that wrap together, and your season comes down to Sunday Night Football at the Steelers against your biggest division rival, and your season ends up coming down to a rookie kicker. So I'm not going to sit here and obviously blame Tyler Loop, and look, anybody that's harassing Tyler Loop for missing the field goal, please don't. Just don't. Just don't. It's just a game. It's just a game. There'll be a new season. There'll be another game. They're human beings. Okay. It's very hard to play in sports, and it's very hard to be a field goal kicker in the National Football League, especially. Don't harass Tyler Loop. Don't harass, obviously there were fans who harassed Mark Andrews last year. Don't harass these guys. Like, it's just a game. Please, it's just a game. It's not that serious. It's just a game. But I don't put all of this on Tyler Loop. I just think it was the culmination of everything we saw this year, and you saw it in a bow. And even in that game, on Sunday, offense was bad for 3 quarters, but then they turned it on. Defense was great for 3 quarters, and then they struggled in the fourth. This is what I'm talking about. Like, they just didn't put it together all season long. They never did. And that's what resulted in the season they had. And you can't start off 1-3 and 1-5. It's incredibly tough to come back from, because the NFL, it's a 1-game season essentially. It's only 16. Well, was 16 games, now 17 games. And you can't put yourself in these holes where you got to climb back from. This isn't Major League Baseball, where it's 162 games where you can get off to a slow start through the first 2 months and bounce back 3 months or whatever, and then bounce back and make the playoffs. This isn't, NHL or NBA where you got a lot of games, or 82 games. This is the NFL. You only got 16, now 17 games. Every season is a 1-week season, essentially. Especially when you get off to a 1-3, 1-5 start. Every game is a must win after that. So add all that up, and then you lose on Sunday. So, and you finish the season after a disappointing year, after all the expectations of a Super Bowl. You finish 8-9, and you miss the playoffs. They just couldn't get it right all season long. They couldn't get it right. They couldn't mesh together. They couldn't put it all together. And that's what's very disappointing. And then, so they lose that game. I credit Tyler Loop, man. Tyler Loop, I'll mention him one more time. I'll credit Tyler Loop. He went to the press and he took it like a champ. He went there for 8 minutes. We had Jordan Stout and Nick Moore by his corner. John Harbaugh was actually with him, cutting into the locker room, comforting him. And I just think, I give him credit for talking to the press and just taking the heat. It's going to be something that's going to follow him throughout the rest of his career. He's only a rookie. I hope he's able to bounce back, just like last year, Mark Andrews. I hope he was able to bounce back, because it's tough. It's incredibly tough, especially for a rookie kicker. It's not easy. Now he's got this label, throughout for a long time, at least until this whole offseason, and maybe throughout his career until he makes big kicks. It stinks, especially for a rookie kicker. It stinks. But he took it, but he went and answered questions, and I think it was 8 or 9 minutes, and he did well. So I think he deserves a lot of credit for that. But again, I don't blame him at all. This was just, that missed kick was just the culmination of a very frustrating and tough season where they just didn't put it together. Your season should not come down to that game itself. If you just played up to your potential, that game doesn't matter, and the season doesn't come down to a rookie kicker, and you're already you're already looking at the playoffs. So, but the Ravens missed the playoffs for the first time since 2021. Monday, there was a locker room cleanout day. Obviously, a lot of questions surrounding the team. What's coming next? Who's going to get fired? Who's not? who's going to get traded, who's released, whatever. And throughout since Sunday night, the consensus was, or at least before the game on Sunday, the consensus was, it was definitely, again, it was up in the air. There were reports, I think, by Adam Schefter, Ian Rappaport, I think, of NFL, and even guys like Jeff Strebeck were kind of adamant that, like, look, Harbaugh is going to stay. But Adam Schefter did say that, but he also said it was definitely more up in the air than you think. And so, but there was still that sentiment that feeling that, yeah, Harbaugh's going to stay, but it looks like it's going to be the coordinators who may or may not be gone. There was a report by, I think, Josina Anderson, and I think maybe even Diana Rossini, that both said that the coordinators would be in question with the Ravens. So that's Todd Monken and Zachary Orr. So that was all yesterday, heading into this morning and earlier this afternoon on Tuesday. Still that same sentiment, still everything going on, still that same sentiment. Seems like Harbaugh is going to stay. And then on Tuesday, today, at exactly, I'll put up the time in the tweet here from the Athletics' Jeff Strebeck 5 hours ago at 5:14 p.m. It was first reported by Adam Schefter. I'm reading it off. I'm reading it off of Jeff Strebeck of the Athletic. Adam Schefter reported this. Oh wow, Carnell Tate's going to the NFL draft. Adam Schefter reported this exactly. Let's take a look. Let me just scroll through his timeline when he first reported this. He reported this at exactly 5:10 p.m. The Baltimore Ravens announced that they had fired John Harbaugh. And what preceded and us finding out the details of how they fired him was kind of a mess. Especially for one of the most well-run organizations like the Ravens. It was kind of a wacky firing, kind of a mess. So from what we were hearing, from what reports have come out, is that no expectation of anybody getting fired, or at least Harbaugh getting fired. Harbaugh expected to be back. The players expected him to be back. Some of the coaching staffs expected him to be back. The front office themselves, Eric DeCosta, etc., Sashi Brown, all expected him to be back. Well, that probably was true until they got a knock on the door, and it was the owner, Steve Bisciotti. This was Steve Bisciotti's call, just like back in January of 2000. This was almost like January 2008 all over again when they fired Brian Billick. That was a Steve Bisciotti call as well. And it was Bisciotti. Apparently, from what I've seen and read, is that John Harbaugh and Steve Bisciotti had a heart-to-heart meeting, and Bisciotti fired him. Bisciotti said that Bisciotti decided to move on from him. Now, apparently, there was also a report from Diana Rossini that said part of this firing happened because Harbaugh refused to fire Todd Monken. He refused to let go of Todd Monken, or at least refused the possibility of letting Todd Monken go. He didn't want to let him go. And I'm actually with Harbaugh on that one, because I think Todd Monken is a good offensive coordinator, and I don't think he was really the problem. Heck, he won 2 games this year without his star quarterback. Like I said, Lamar Jackson was out for essentially 6 games, the 4 full games and the 2 other games, the Chiefs and the Patriots, where he got hurt in. So essentially 6, he had to miss the rest of them. So essentially 6 games. Monken had to put in Tyler Huntley and Cooper Rush, and perform admirably with Tyler Huntley for 2 big wins that kept the Ravens season going. So I'm on Harbaugh's side there. I also would have to think that Zachary Orr was maybe a part of those conversations. We haven't seen any reports. That's just speculation that Zachary Orr was maybe a part of these discussions as well. But that's just, again, speculation, more or less, not actual reports. The only name we saw was Todd Monken. But maybe that's also because Todd Monken is interviewing for other jobs right now. I think or at least there are other teams that are looking to interview him. But anyway, this was kind of a mess, because when the Ravens fired him, when Steve Bisciotti made the decision to fire John Harbaugh, like I said, this was a Steve Bisciotti decision. I'll read Steve Bisciotti's statement here from the Baltimore Ravens. But this was very much like January 2008 when they fired Brian Billick after 9 years. That was a Steve Bisciotti decision, and that led to the hiring of John Harbaugh. But Brian Billick obviously had a really good run with the Ravens himself. But he had hit, a part where he had missed the playoffs 3 of the last 4 years. They hadn't won a playoff game since 2001 when they beat Miami. They missed the playoffs 3 of the last 4 years. 2 of the previous 3 years in 05 and 07. In between 06, they were 6-10 and 5-11, 6-10 in 2005, and didn't win a road game that year. In 2007, they were 5-11, lost 9 in a row after a 4-2 start, and including losing to at the time, I think 13 or 14 Miami Dolphins team. And he still had a really good run, Brian Billick. He set the tone for coaches here in Baltimore. But it was just, again, Steve Bisciotti stepped in and said, look, we need a new voice. We need a new voice. And they fired Brian Billick after he had a very successful 9-year run. And I think it just reached the same with John Harbaugh. It was the fact that, and we saw it, and I saw reports that said it was the fact that the team had won 3 playoff games since 2018. They had won 3 playoff games since 2018, since Lamar became the quarterback, and their current core crop of players. They haven't been able to reach the Super Bowl like expectations felt, or at least Steve Bisciotti felt there was big expectations. And Steve Bisciotti felt that we need a new voice, just like he did back in January 2008. Even with Brian Billick's success, he felt the same way. We need a new voice. And I think he felt it here too, 19 years later, that we need a new voice. So it was his decision. And Steve Bisciotti, very interesting, made it a point in his statement that he was the one that fired him. I'll read the statement. Following a comprehensive evaluation of the season and the overall, this is again from Steve Bisciotti, and the overall direction of our organization, I decided to make a change at head coach today. I informed John Harbaugh that he has been relieved of his duties. This was an incredibly difficult decision, given the tremendous 18 years we have spent together and the profound respect I have for John as a coach, and most importantly, as a great man of integrity. Throughout what I firmly believe is a Hall of Fame coaching career, John has delivered a Super Bowl championship to Baltimore and served as a steadfast pillar of humility and leadership. He and his family have deeply embedded themselves in this community for these profound contributions on and off the field. We shall be forever grateful. Our goal has always been and will always be to win championships. We strive to, and that's the big one right there, I think. We strive to consistently perform at the highest level on the field and be a team and organization for our fans to take pride in. I will always be grateful for the extraordinary hard work and dedication displayed by John and his staff throughout the many successful years. I wish he, Ingrid, and Allison, his wife and daughter, all the best going forward. We now begin the challenging but exciting process of identifying the next leader of our football team. We fully understand the expectations of our fans and everyone in the Ravens organization. Finding another strong leader and partner who will reflect these high standards as paramount. We deeply appreciate our fans and will continue to work relentlessly to bring them, our city, and extended community the success they deserve. Obviously, there's a lot to. John Harbaugh also came out with a statement as well. Harbaugh came out with a statement as well. His is a little interesting to read. His is a little interesting to read because there's also an emoji in here, but it's kind of a very John Harbaugh thing. John Harbaugh said, I was hoping for a different kind of message on my last day here someday, but that day has come today. It comes, and there's the emoji. It's a smile emoji. It comes with a disappointment, certainly, but more with gratitude and appreciation. Gratitude to the owner and organization who's willing to bring in a head coach who made his mark with special team success. A difficult thing to do, and appreciation for all the moments, all these years that are etched into eternity. I hope a legacy built on faith, always fighting and always believing. Values built into an organization through a team that are worthwhile, good and lasting, and that are admired by fans and foes alike. Meaningful and impactful relationships with players throughout the years I will cherish always. Grateful for their strength and courage. Loyal partnerships in this wonderful building that grew into strong friendships throughout the toil and tempest of the job every day. Mostly to my treasured family, my Ingrid and my Allison, who are beyond compare in every way in the loves of my life, and my close-knit family and good friends who stick with you no matter what. Finally, to the author and finisher of our faith, gratitude for a journey beyond anything I could have dreamed of on my own. All is well with my soul because of the good God who guides and sustains me. John Harbaugh. So that's a statement from John Harbaugh after the news of his firing came, or after he was informed. And obviously, it's that, and here comes the mess, right? Everything after. Here comes the mess. So apparently, the Ravens John Harbaugh didn't even tell his staff that he was being fired. When this news broke by Adam Schefter, the coaching staff, the rest of the coaching staff didn't know. They didn't. Harbaugh didn't even get a chance to tell his staff that he was fired, that he was being let go. And apparently the players didn't even know either. The players didn't even know. Apparently there was like a Zoom thing that they were invited on. There was like a Zoom thing, I think. That was informed at 6:00 that they had to make. Yeah, this is from Gianna Hahn from the Baltimore Banner. Players have indicated that they found out John Harbaugh was out through social media or friends reaching out to them. Social media, the players finding out by looking at everybody else's tweets. Apparently, they got a notification around 5:55 for a team Zoom at 6. Well after the news had broken, and within just a few minutes heads up, as many are moving out. According to a team spokesperson, the team had hoped to be able to tell the players, but the news was leaked before they were able to get an announcement together. Many players have expressed surprise at the news. I mean, my goodness. How do you not inform your players, or at least give Harbaugh the opportunity to tell the coaching staff that he was being let go before this thing even gets leaked, or this thing gets thing. Jeff Zrebiec then says, or before Jeff Zrebiec of The Athletic says that Harbaugh didn't have the chance to inform his staff of his firing is proof of how quickly this all went down. Neither side was prepared for this outcome today. Ravens team president Sashi Brown, again, we go to the front office, and GM Eric DeCosta informed Harbaugh's staff of his departure. Yeah, not even the front office apparently knew. Not even the Ravens front office apparently knew that he was going to get fired. Again, this was, and Steve Bisciotti made it a point in his statement that this was his decision. There was no Eric DeCosta involved, no Ozzie Newsome even involved. I know Ozzie's a senior consultant now and everything, a senior advisor, so he's obviously not really truly, he's more of an advisor. He's not truly part of the day-to-day operations anymore, obviously, but not even him, not Sashi Brown. No, this was Steve Bisciotti having it out with John Harbaugh saying, we're gonna go in a different direction. And Gary Myers, obviously, we'll get into New York now. Gary Myers obviously works for the New York Daily News. John Harbaugh's big coaching destination looks to be the New York Giants. Now, the New York Giants were looking at Stefanski. Apparently, looks like they might be having a meeting with Stefanski, an interview meet with Stefanski tomorrow. The Cleveland Browns fired Kevin Stefanski on Monday. It looks like they were going to hire, or at least in the process of trying to hire Stefanski, but there were reports that came out before the Ravens lost to Pittsburgh, before that game against the Steelers, that if John Harbaugh did become available, he would be at the top of their list. John Harbaugh would over Stefanski. So now that Harbaugh is available, he's now jumped ahead of Stefanski in terms of where the Giants are looking at. So obviously the New York beat guys and beat reporters and sports media guys are now on top of this and trying to get more into the story and more everything what's going on. And so Gary Myers of the Daily News about the New York Giants, he added this. I hear firing Harbaugh was solely Ravens owner Steve Bisciotti's decision, which clearly it was. And it went against his front office and went against the front office who were unable to talk to him or who were unable to talk him out of it. So kind of a mess, when you look at it. Like, the coaching staff wasn't informed of his firing. Again, it like Jeff Zrebiec said, it speaks to how quickly this was. And the fact that people are saying, like Ian Rappaport says it, that for all intents and purposes, Harbaugh walked into the office today, did not expect to be fired. He walked into the office today not expecting to be fired. This was a Steve Bisciotti decision. This was Steve Bisciotti pulling him aside in his office or whatever and said, look, we think we can do better. This was a very disappointing season. We were supposed to be in the Super Bowl. We've had playoff disappointment after playoff disappointments throughout the years. We haven't won a Super Bowl with Lamar Jackson yet. And that's another thing. Don't get this twisted. They chose Lamar Jackson over John Harbaugh. This was choosing Lamar Jackson over John Harbaugh as well. Maybe not the front office, but, because again, the front office wasn't involved in this firing. Let's make this very clear. Eric DeCosta, the general manager of the Baltimore Ravens, had nothing to do with this. He had nothing to do with the firing of John Harbaugh, which probably puts his seat warm. Probably puts his seat a little warm too when you think about it. But this was the owner of the Baltimore Ravens, Steve Bisciotti, one of the best owners in all of football since he became the minority owner in 2000 with the Ravens when he had 49% of the team, learning under the 51% of Art Modell. When he was learning under Art Modell, who was the majority owner. To now, Steve Bisciotti has been one of the best owners in the National. I know there are Ravens fans that are, kind of like, oh, where is Steve? Where is he? Where is he? We haven't seen him. We haven't seen him. We haven't seen him. Where is he? Where is he? Where is he? Bisciotti is a under the radar owner. He's been that way for a long time. He's a guy that will, obviously he hasn't done his State of the Ravens pressers as of late. Probably going to do one now, I assume. Probably hold one now, but he's an under the radar, lets his football people do the work, and he does his work as the owner. And look, that's how you're supposed to operate a sports team, and he's been very successful at that for 25, 26 years. Back when he was the minority owner, learning under Art Modell, majority, and then when Bisciotti officially took over as the majority owner in 2004 to now. So from 2000, 2004 to now, he's been one of the best owners in all of the National Football League. And he is a guy who, will talk and get in and, put his input in when he feels like he should. And he's not freaking Jerry Jones that is going to meddle in everything, or Woody Johnson's going to meddle in everything. That's not Bisciotti, and that's not a successful way of winning. Look at the Jets and Cowboys. It's not a success of winning. So, but Bisciotti stepped in. This was one of those times, I guess, one of those moments where Bisciotti stepped in and said, guys, I made the decision to fire him. So this was, I think, Steve Bisciotti choosing Lamar Jackson over John Harbaugh. So because of the Lamar contract stuff and everything that's going on, $70 million of cap money he's owed, and the fact that Lamar is about to enter year 9, coming off a tough season, 3rd season out of 5 where he's been hurt, injury-riddled season this year, of course, obviously including. This was him choosing Lamar over Harbaugh. So, and I'm sure Lamar, when he gets paid, because I'm sure he will get paid, he will get some input. He will have some input in the decision to hire a new head coach. So that's just, again, no speculation, but I'm just, not really, well, it is speculation. I apologize. No reporting or anything on that. It's just speculation. It's just my opinion that Lamar will have some big input on who they hire as the next head coach. Speaking of Lamar, obviously, and the players, obviously, when you hear this, you wonder, okay, was there anything going on? Obviously, we heard from, I know a lot of Ravens fans didn't want to buy it, obviously, but, and look, I take what Mike Preston says sometimes with a grain of salt. I do. But in this instance, his article, he talked about the relationship that Harbaugh and Lamar had, that it wasn't as rosy as it used to be. And look, that's what kind of happens when you spend 8 years together and you're not reaching the ultimate goal. Pride and ego and stubbornness, I'm sure, takes over. It kind of takes over. So he reported that, or put in his article and column, that they really weren't meshing well together. So, and hey, if the quarterback and head coach aren't really meshing well together right now, then surely maybe the players are kind of seeing it too, because obviously this is Lamar, this is the quarterback. But he said that, and a lot of people kind of were like, I don't know, that seems a little, off or whatever. And obviously Lamar was very adamant that he had a great relationship with Harbaugh. Harbaugh was very adamant that he had a great relationship with Lamar. But then we get the reports that came out today, a couple of different ones. But we get one from Gary Myers, of course, in New York, who said in that same tweet that Harbaugh did not have a problem with Lamar Jackson. The issue was between Jackson and Todd Monken, which is something we've kind of heard about, that Todd Monken and Lamar and the offensive players have also kind of not really been on the same page, which is a little interesting because, again, I think Monken's done a good job overall, but that's also something we've also heard a little bit sparingly, that the offense and the offensive players and Monken weren't really on the same page. But then Ian Rappaport said that there was some friction between Lamar and Harbaugh. There was some sort of friction between the two. That's what it kind of came down to, and that John Harbaugh supposedly did lose the locker room. Rappaport cited several sources that players had doubts about whether they wanted to play for Harbaugh anymore. Rappaport adds that the players' opinions were highly valued in this decision, including those of people. Rappaport here, the situation started with Jackson and Harbaugh not being on the same page, and that opinion trickled throughout the locker room. Although Rappaport points out that it was 100% of the roster, or I guess it was 100% of the roster, it was more than enough. So that it wasn't 100% of the roster, it was more than enough to sway Baltimore's decision, in this case, Steve Bisciotti. There have been talk about Harbaugh's job security in Baltimore after the team failed to make the playoffs. Steve Bisciotti reportedly had grown frustrated with Harbaugh's lack of playoff success in recent years. Again, that goes back to pretty much since 2018 when Lamar became the quarterback. And only 3 playoff wins under him. So, again, that's going to be – we're probably going to see – it's not the first – this is definitely not the first dose of reporting that we're going to see about Harbaugh and Lamar and what their relationship was and everything like that. You know, we're going to see a lot of different things, I'm sure, in the coming days of what led to this and what was Harbaugh in the locker room going through. You know, and look, when you've been the head coach for 18 years, yeah, you might lose the locker room eventually. You know, especially with a current crop of players, a current core of players that hasn't gotten to the ultimate goal. They haven't even come close to the ultimate goal, right? I know they got to the AFC Championship game 2 years ago, but they didn't even come close to winning that one. The Chiefs pretty much had control of that game the whole day, and now they were in Baltimore in the AFC Championship game. So, again, I could understand why maybe the locker room is just kind of like, you know, and everyone's just kind of fatigued with each other. They're just kind of tired of each other, you know, and eventually the longtime head coach is going to take the fall and take the blame, and he's going to be the one looking for a new job while the players, or at least most of the players, will stick around. Again, we're probably going to see a lot of this in the coming days in terms of different reports and everything. So we'll see. But, you know, if there's one thing, to go back to Mike Preston, if there's one thing you got to say, maybe that one part in his article, I guess it might have been true. Who knows? You know, that him and Harbaugh just weren't really seeing that Lamar and Harbaugh just weren't on the same page. And I guess, like I said, that's what happens when after 8 years and you're trying so hard to reach the ultimate goal and you're struggling to, and it's been frustrating. They just clash. You know, these are things that we see in sports all the time. And eventually one of them is going to go, and well, sure as hell is not going to be the 29-year-old 2-time MVP quarterback in his prime. I sure as heck ain't going to be him. So it's going to be the 18-year head coach that's going to take the fall and take the blame and get the finger point and say, look, thank you for everything you've done, but we're going to move in a different direction. So the Ravens, for the 4th time in their history, will look for a new head coach. Ted Marchibroda was the first coach when the team first moved from Cleveland to Baltimore from 1996 to 1998. Of course, Brian Billick, as mentioned before, head coach from 1999 to 2007. They won the Super Bowl in 2000 and won a playoff game again in 2001. He won 5 playoff games, won the Super Bowl, went to the playoffs to the playoffs in 2000, 2001, 2003, and 2006. You know, he won a lot of games, won 5 playoff games. John Harbaugh leaves, 18 years, was it 12 or 13 playoff appearances, you know, in 2000, you know, 12 or 13 playoff appearances, a lot of playoff wins, a lot of wins overall in 18 years, a Super Bowl. You know, he leaves a legacy that, you know, criticized or not, obviously, because obviously there's a lot of Ravens fans who are cheering the firing of John Harbaugh because they blamed him for the Ravens' lack of getting to a Super Bowl. He's been the scapegoat. He's been the guy that they pointed to. But overall, you know, this was a very successful run. I know some might say, well, it was underachieving because he didn't win another one. And look, I wish he would have gotten that second ring. I wish he would have gotten it. He definitely should have had more than one ring. I totally agree on that. But it's very hard. The one thing we all have to understand is that it's very hard to win a Super Bowl in the National Football League. Again, this is only a one-game season. This isn't a series or it's 162 games like baseball. This is a one-game season every year, 16 games, now 17 games. The playoffs is not a series. It's only one game. It is extremely hard to win one Super Bowl, let alone two. Andy Reid was fired in Philadelphia. He didn't win any Super Bowls. He went to 5 NFC Championship games and went to a Super Bowl. Mike McCarthy won a Super Bowl early in his Packer career. In his actually, it wasn't that early. I'm sorry, it wasn't really that early. He became the head coach in 06, so 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 in year 5, just like John Harbaugh in year 5. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, 5 years, just like John Harbaugh, 5 years. So McCarthy won the Super Bowl in his 5th year as the head coach of the Green Bay Packers. Never even got back. Never got back after that. Sean Payton, same thing, won the Super Bowl in 2009 in year 4 after he took the job with the Saints in 2006. And then he never got back with the Saints with Drew Brees at quarterback. He never got back. McCarthy was with Aaron Rodgers. Never got back. It is really hard. Bill Cowher went years and years and years and years and years trying to get back to the Super Bowl after he lost it to the Cowboys in Super Bowl 30. Got back. He was that coach. He was the ringless coach. So many losses in the AFC Championship game, so many playoff disappointments, but the Steelers kept riding them, and they finally won it all in 2005. And he finally got that championship. He got one Super Bowl after all those years that he'd been trying. And we'll look at even Mike Tomlin. Mike Tomlin won the Super Bowl early in his career, 2008, and he's another one that, heck, if that, what a domino effect. If that field goal by Tyler Luke goes through and it's good, we might be sitting here talking about Mike Tomlin being fired and not John Harbaugh. But again, we talked about on the last show what this game on Sunday meant, and the Ravens coming on the other end of it, they now are the ones that have the uncertain future while the Steelers move on to the playoffs. Now, what happens to the Steelers on Monday night could change things. Obviously, they play the Houston Texans. If the Steelers lose badly, then for all we know, maybe Tomlin gets fired anyway. But if they come out and play hard or they win, maybe Tomlin's, then you look at Tomlin sticking around. But anyway, Tomlin had won a Super Bowl in year two. He did get back, but they lost, and he's been looking to get that second ring since. It is incredibly hard to win one Super Bowl, let alone two. It's very hard. So I wish Harbaugh would have gotten it. And trust me, there were definitely a lot of years where he should have won a second Super Bowl. I think of 2011. I think of especially 2011. I especially think of 2011 before they won the Super Bowl in 2012 and 2023. I especially think of those 2 years that those should have been Super Bowl years. 2019, 2010, even last year, if you want to say 2024, like there was a bunch of other years, sure, where you think like, shoot, man, you should have won the Super Bowl there. The thing is, there's a lot of years like that too for a lot of teams. A lot of teams have those kind of years. It's very, 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 very hard. It's very hard. Pete Carroll won the Super Bowl in 2013 with the Seahawks. Got back the year later. Of course, the interception by Malcolm Butler, and he didn't get back after that. Didn't win another one after that. He won the Super Bowl in 2013. Didn't win another one after that, with some great Seahawk teams and defenses and such. It's very hard. It's very hard. I know I'm repeating myself and I sound like a broken record, but it's very hard. But overall, overall, John Harbaugh did a heck of a job in the 18 years he was the Ravens head coach. He did a heck of a job. Again, I mentioned before, he came into a team that had missed the playoffs 3 of the last 4 years, hadn't won a playoff game since 2001. They had made the playoffs in 03 and 06, but they were one and done to the Titans and the Colts. They collapsed down the stretch and faded and lost down the stretch in 2004 to miss the playoffs after getting off to a good start. They were 6-10 in 2005 without winning a road game. They were 5-11 in 2007, not winning a road game. And then in 2007, they were 5-11, lost 9 in a row, including to the Miami Dolphins. This was a team that, they had, the Super Bowl was 8. The recent Super Bowl now, of course, is longer, 14 years now. or, 13, 12, 14 years now. But back then, the recent Super Bowl in 2000 was 8 years before, was 8 years ago back then. So some time had passed, just like time has passed here. So again, he came into a situation that they hadn't won a playoff game in a while. They had missed the playoffs 3 of the last 4 years. That's why I think a lot of people I do think there are some people, Ravens fans especially, that kind of, underestimate Harbaugh in terms of how important he was to the franchise, because they always say, well, he came into this locker room with Ray Lewis, this locker room with Ed Reed and Terrell Suggs and Haloti Ngata and, Will Smith, Derek Mason, Todd Heap, etc. That's all true, obviously. That's all true, obviously, but this was also still a locker room that hadn't won a playoff game in a while. The Super Bowl was obviously 8 years before. They had missed the playoffs 3 of the last 4 years. So that was still the same. Again, all great players, and obviously Ray's a Hall of Famer, Ed Reed's a Hall of Famer, two of the greatest of their positions. Two of the greatest of their positions. Terrell Suggs is more than likely going to be a Hall of Famer eventually. Haloti Ngata, you could argue, is a fringe Hall of Famer or such, if not at least a very, very, very good player, especially in his prime. Todd Heap was a really good player, although injuries had caught up to him by 2008, 2009. Derek Mason was still a very productive wide receiver. But at the same time, their records, and what they were doing, what the team had been doing, in the recent years prior to Harbaugh's arrival, spoke for itself. And when Harbaugh, and I think people either don't remember that because it's been 20 years now. So obviously a long time has passed for us to really remember back then, or at least for us to not remember, but know the feeling of what it was back in January 2008, I don't mean to sound mean, but you're just too young because you've known John Harbaugh your entire life. John Harbaugh has, for me, Brian Billick was my first Ravens head coach. A lot of people, for you, John Harbaugh was your first coach, and he's been your only coach. He's been your only coach. So I can understand. I understand. But, I do think a lot is missing to when we tell the story of when Harbaugh first got here. And look, he turned them into virtually contenders every single year, virtually every year they were contenders. Only a select handful of losing seasons, right? Legit losing seasons, a handful of legit losing seasons. That's 2015, 2015, this year, and I think 2021 as well. So only 3 years. That's it. 3 out of 18 where they were losing seasons. Every year, but even this year, they were in it till the very end. They were literally a field goal away from from playing a playoff game on Monday night. So, and that was with your quarterback being injured for a large part of the season. So again, his accomplishments do speak for themselves, despite what some or many may think of him now. He's a really, 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 really good head coach who's going to be coveted and will very well be a head coach, I would say, in a matter of days. I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of the week he's the head coach of the New York Giants. I wouldn't be surprised. But he was easily the best. Look, I love Brian Billick. Brian Billick is my favorite head coach in Ravens history, but John Harbaugh is the better coach. He was the better coach, and he was a really, really, really good head coach for 18 years and led a lot of success and a lot of winning. And obviously the question is, and look, I know in the midst of the celebration, I'm sure a lot of Ravens fans are doing, you're going to have to say, and remember, can the next head coach be just as good? Because remember, that next head coach is coming into a very interesting situation. Lamar Jackson is going to be entering year 9 in his career. He's going to be entering his 9th season in the league. He's had 3 out of 5 years, the last 5 years, where he's been hurt. And this year was a very especially tough injured season. Very tough injured season for him. He had to battle through a lot this year. So he'll be 29 tomorrow. Tomorrow's his birthday. He'll be 20. I know that because tomorrow's also my birthday as well. I always found that cool. We share a birthday. But he turns 29 tomorrow, January 7th. The next year later, he'll be 30. The next year later, he'll be 30. So whoever comes in here is not only going to have to be as good as Harbaugh and still win a lot of games, but also win a Super Bowl pretty soon. pretty soon in the next 3, 4, or 5 years, at least in the next 3 years. Like, but in the next 3 years or so, the Ravens are going to have a championship with this head coach that's coming in, because Lamar is going to get older, and who knows again if he continues to have injuries. Who knows? Like I said, he's been hurt 3 of the last 5 years, unfortunately. So we'll see. We'll see. It's going to be, that's the interesting question. Can you find a viable replacement? It is. I think a lot of people underestimate again how hard it is to find a good coach in the National Football League. It is hard to find a good one, man. And if you don't find a good one, you're off on that carousel and you have no idea when you're going to get out of it. So it is the same thing like quarterback. It is the same thing like quarterback. If you lose a good quarterback, you might be on that carousel and you don't know what you're going to get. So I guess it goes both ways, right? If we're talking about Harbaugh and Lamar, it goes both ways, sure, but it still goes that way with the coach as well. You don't know who's coming in. We don't know if that person coming in is better than John Harbaugh. No one really knows until we find out next year, in September, when the season begins, when the 2026 season begins. We won't know. So, but that next head coach is going to have, sure, it's a great coaching spot. I mean, shoot, you're going to have a great GM in Eric DeCosta. I still think he's a good GM. He's like I said, he's been taking a lot of flack now recently over the past season. The fact that he wasn't even notified about Harbaugh and Bisciotti's decision to fire him or at least he wasn't involved in the process to fire him, kind of is a bit telling. I got to think DeCosta's seat is getting a little bit warmer as well. But even still, DeCosta is a very good GM. You have a very good owner in Steve Bisciotti. You have a stable organization overall that has been a winning organization for 25, 26 years now. And you're going to have a 29-year-old top 5 quarterback in the league who's won the MVP a couple of times, and he's still at least in the prime of his career. This is a very attractive spot. The Ravens have become, and you still have a lot of great players, right? Like Zay Flowers. I assume Derrick Henry's back. Ronnie Stanley, Roquan Smith, Kyle Hamilton, etc. Nate Wiggins, Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely. You're still, and even young players like Akeem Mitchell and such. This is a very, talented roster overall. Still, we've said it a billion times, obviously, but this is still a very good, talented roster right there for you if you're if you're a coach looking to be a head coach somewhere. The Ravens are a very attractive destination. So, but the Ravens have to get this right. They have to get this right as much as they had to get it right in 99 when they hired Brian Billick, and as much as they had to get it right in 2008 when they hired John Harbaugh. So, but especially now, considering where we're at with, Lamar entering his 9th season. So, and look, speaking of Lamar, just very quickly, John Harbaugh was kind of like that. Maybe Eric DeCosta becomes that, but John Harbaugh was kind of that last scapegoat, I think, right? That people pointed to when it came to, Lamar and his time here, right? Over the past 8 years, right? Baltimore Ravens fans, a lot of people, recently, nationally too, have really spoken out about Harbaugh. So, unfortunately, here's the thing with Lamar Jackson. There's no more scapegoats anymore. Harbaugh was kind of that last guy. Maybe DeCosta becomes that, but Harbaugh was kind of that last guy. There's no more scapegoats anymore. There's no more excuses. Look, you are a great quarterback. Top 5, top 3 in the league. You've won the MVP. You're going to get paid again in the offseason, I'm sure, a lot of money. He is a great quarterback. But with Harbaugh, not with the fault, but Harbaugh was the one to take the fall. He said there were other guys took the fall too. Greg Roman, Hollywood Brown, now Harbaugh, the training staff, even trainers took the fall. But John Harbaugh over the past, really since 2022, 2023, he was the one that was really taking, was getting a lot of the blame and a lot of fingers are being pointed at him. Well, now he ain't there anymore. And apparently if him and Lamar, this is again, according to Ian Rappaport, and I guess also Mike Preston as well, that if they weren't meshing together, okay, he's out now. Harbaugh is now no longer the head coach. He'll be a head coach of another team, and he will be. He'll be the head coach of another team, not of the Baltimore Ravens. So again, I'm not saying Lamar ran out John Harbaugh. I'm not saying that, but I'm not saying Lamar ran him out. What I'm saying is, the scapegoat for Lamar over the past couple of years, before it was Greg Roman and other people. Now it was John Harbaugh, and he's not there. So he's entering year 9 now next year with a brand new head coach incoming, whoever it is. But there's no more scapegoats anymore. No more excuses. No more scapegoats. It's all on him now, Lamar. It's all on him now. Not saying he's the sole reason and everything. He's the sole person that's got to take the team on his back. So I'm not saying that, but in terms of like the responsibility and everything, and, people looking at it, it's all on him now. There's no more excuses, no more scapegoating. This is all on Lamar Jackson now. Win the Super Bowl. Just win, it's not easy, of course, but go win the Super Bowl. Got to win the Super Bowl. Win the Super Bowl. Do what you said you were going to do on draft day when you said you're going to get a Super Bowl out of me. Win the Super Bowl. So there's no more excuses, no more scapegoats, no more nothing like that. He's got to win the Super Bowl. So, and I think he can. I think he's got all the talent in the world, all the gifts that he's got in the world to hoist the Lombardi Trophy one day and get what he deserves, which is a Super Bowl championship and a ring to Baltimore, to the Ravens. So he's got all the talent, to win a Super Bowl. He truly does. It's just, again, they haven't been able to, and look, a lot of it falls on him, even on Sunday, he was great in the fourth quarter, played the best fourth quarter of his entire career, but I needed that in the first 3 quarters. So, but like I said, there's no more excuses now, no more scapegoats. It's all on him. It's all on Lamar. Win the Super Bowl, my friend. We all believe you can win the Super Bowl. So we'll see. But that is, but with John Harbaugh now fired, like I said, there'll probably be more information to come in the next coming days. But obviously, this is it's a tough day, obviously, for the Ravens. It's a day, I'm sure the Ravens, it's a tough day for the Ravens. It's a day the Ravens, I'm sure, didn't see coming. Clearly, they didn't see coming. The players in the front office certainly didn't. John Harbaugh certainly didn't. The coaching staff certainly didn't. Everyone else, aside from Steve Bisciotti, didn't see this coming. So it's obviously been a tough last 3 days, for the Ravens, and it's been a tough 3 days for everybody, from the team to the fan base and everything. And now the Ravens enter a new era. They enter the era of 2008 on is now completely gone. It's now completely gone. And that is 18 years of Ravens football, right? 18 years from 2008 to now. That's to 2025. It's gone now. A lot of people grew up with that. That era is now officially, truly gone. It's now officially, truly gone. Ray Lewis's retirement, Ed Reed's free agency and leaving, Terrell Suggs leaving event in free agency, Haloti Ngata being traded, Joe Flacco being traded, Marshall Yanda retiring. Obviously, the Justin Tucker situation that led to his release. Sam Koch's retirement, Anquan Boldin being traded, Torrey Smith leaving in free agency, Derek Mason and Todd Heap being released before the 2011 season, even, before the 2011 season, the Ray Rice situation that led to his release before the 2014 season, Chris McAllister being released after 2008. It's those years of Ravens, CJ Mosley leaving for the Jets, and Brandon Williams obviously retiring after spending a long time there, so on and so forth, right? Actually Mark Andrews still remains, Lamar Jackson, obviously, but I'm talking about all those guys that have been there since 2008, right? All those guys that have been there since that 2008 squad, that 2008 core that were together to when they won the Super Bowl and even a little bit past it, right? That's, they're all gone now. That team is now with John Harbaugh with John Harbaugh now fired, with John Harbaugh, Ozzie Newsome, taking a step back and retiring and stepping down as GM. Every single one of them from 2008, they're no longer there. So this is, truly now the beginning of a new era of Ravens football. So it'll be interesting to see where they go from here and who the next head coach will be, because it's a very attractive spot, but it's also big shoes to fill with a lot of expectations, a lot of high expectations. And unfortunately, that new head coach is not going to have a long window. He's going to have a pretty, short term, right? Because the goal is going to be to win a championship right away. The goal is going to be to him to turn around and for them to win these games that they haven't been able to win as of late, right? That's been his goal. Now, I think, I do think part of it is the players. I just think the players in this current core just hasn't proven, they themselves haven't shown to, well, again, I think back to what Marlon Humphrey said, right? Marlon Humphrey said, I think he meant this in both ways, when you win and when you lose. Marlon Humphrey said in his podcast today that the players make the coach, and I think he meant that both ways, when they win and when they lose. When you win, it's great. The coach is great. Everything's great, right? But when you lose, everything sucks. The coach sucks, whatever. So it goes to that, right? The players themselves weren't really able to perform in these games, and that's everybody, and, making these mistakes and beating themselves and stuff like that. And at the end, Harbaugh was fired as a result because they pointed the finger at him, because that's just what happens when you lose in sports. It's great when you win, and then point the finger at everybody when you lose. So so I do kind of think about that comment now from Marlon Humphrey on his podcast that when he taped earlier, that he put out today, that he taped yesterday, but on Monday. But, I do put a lot of it in the players because they haven't shown me over the last 8 years that they're a championship caliber bunch. That they're a championship caliber bunch. I don't know if a new head coach, he can probably bring you a new, fresh, young voice, but I don't know if a new head coach can bring out all of a sudden, just like that, bring it out of a championship team that just hasn't been able to show up over the last 8 years, that can win these games against Pittsburgh, that can win these games against the Chiefs, that can win these games against the Bills, that can win these games against anybody. I don't know if he will immediately fix that. I don't know. I do think a lot of it is a player thing, that they're just not fully, that they're not, a championship group, core group of players. Maybe we'll see. Maybe this is a wake-up call to the players as well. Maybe this is a wake-up call to the players as well. Like, oh, dang, we got to step it up here because Harbaugh's fired. We got to step it up here. So maybe this is a bit of a wake-up call for them too as well. Maybe this is. But like I said, I think what they have shown over the last 8 years, unfortunately, is that they're just not a core group of players that's been good enough to win a championship. You need to, I've always said it, right? They haven't been able to make the winning play. Players got to play as well. They got to make the winning play, and they haven't been able to do that for the last 8 years. So, and I do think a lot of that does fall on the players as well, but we'll see what happens next. It's a new era in Ravens football coming up. We'll see who their new head coaches will be. Their fourth head coach in their team's history. Shoot, they've had 2 head coaches in the last 26, 27 years. Again, you greatly appreciate that, right? Billick for 9 years, Harbaugh for 18 years. You greatly appreciate that as a fan, especially when you see teams like the Jets flip-flop coaches, or you see the Cleveland Browns, once again, flip-flopping coaches, or the Jacksonville Jaguars constantly flip-flop coaches, or the before they landed Dan Campbell, the Detroit Lions flip-flopping through coaches, or even the Dallas Cowboys flip-flopping through coaches, the Commanders flip-flopping through coaches. Like the Raiders, of course, once again are in the head coaching market. They flip-flop through coaches. You as a Ravens fan, appreciate that you've only had 2 head coaches in the last 26 years, because it is incredibly hard to get that coaching position right. And when you get that position right, it's like, hey, we got stability. So the Ravens, so you do appreciate that they've had 2 head coaches in the last 26 years. So, and both have been very successful, Billick and Harbaugh. So my hat's off to Harbaugh. I wish him all the best. I wish him well. I hope he does. If he does come, I live in New York, if he does come here to New York, if he does come to the Giants, become their coach, if he succeeds, knowing his personality and his passion and his, intensity and his will to win and everything like that, and being a player coach and being a leader of men and trying to win football games and such like that, he brings that to the Giants. If they can win with him, he'll be a rock star in New York. He'll be a rock star. But obviously, we still have to wait and see if he becomes the head coach of the Giants. But obviously, that seems to be what we're all hearing and everything with the reports out that the Giants are the favorites. It seems like to land him. They're high on him, so we'll see. But as far as him, for Harbaugh and his time with the Ravens, he did a heck of a job overall. It was a heck of a run, and it was a fun 18 years. So my best wishes to him, and I hope he succeeds wherever he lands and where it goes, because I think he's still a really, really good head coach. So, and he'll be in the Ravens Ring of Honor one day, along with Ray and Ed and Nada and Suggs and Jamal Lewis and Ogden and Ray, and soon probably Joe Flacco soon, Michael McCrary, Marshall Yanda, he'll be in the Ring of Honor with all those guys. And when he retires, he's probably got a gold jacket waiting for him in Canton, Ohio. He's probably got a gold jacket waiting for him in Canton, Ohio for the Pro Football Hall of Fame one day. So, so he's, so I appreciate everything he did as the Ravens head coach. He was a really good head coach, but so we'll see but he did a really good job as the Ravens head coach. He was really good, really good. So we'll see what the Ravens do from here on out. But very eventful last 3 days for the Baltimore Ravens, especially in the Ravens franchise and the Ravens organization. To the NFL playoffs, as I've been talking about the Ravens for the last hour and 15 minutes. Hey, it's been a long 3 days. But the NFL playoffs, back to the NFL playoffs. The NFL playoffs are set. The NFC South division winners is the Carolina Panthers. The Panthers have won the NFC South after they lost to Tampa Bay on Saturday. They lost to Tampa Bay this past Saturday, but the Atlanta Falcons won their game over the New Orleans Saints, which means the winners of the NFC South Division Championship is the Carolina Panthers at 8-9. The NFC South, ladies and gentlemen. So the Carolina Panthers are the division champions. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers missed the playoffs. Just a real disappointing season for the Bucs. Started off so promising in 6-2. Looked like they were going to run away with the division again, but they faltered down the stretch. Even though they won their game the other day against Carolina, but they go 2-7 down the stretch, and that's what hurt them. And in the end, they missed the playoffs, and that's just a real tough one for the Bucs. But everyone's coming back for Tampa Bay. Bowles and Lick, all of them, they're coming back. So, but a really tough season for the Bucs. But the Panthers are the NFC South Division champions. Also on Saturday night, the Seattle Seahawks beat the 49ers, and they win the NFC West. The Seahawks win the NFC West, and they have clinched home field advantage throughout the playoffs with the number 1 seed in the AFC. Speaking of the number 1 seed, the Denver Broncos won their game on Sunday against the Chargers. They are the number 1 seed in the AFC. The Patriots are the 2 seed. The Jaguars are the 3 seed as they win the NFC South. And of course, as we all know, as we mentioned before, the Pittsburgh Steelers are the AFC North champions. They are the 4 seed. Texans and the wild card winners of each conference in the NFC or the AFC. In the AFC conference for the wild cards, the Texans, the Bills, and the Chargers. The NFC bracket, the NFC seedings look like this: the Seahawks, the Bears at the 2 seed, the Eagles at the 3 seed, the Panthers at the Eagles, Bears over the Eagles because the Bears beat them after Thanksgiving. Panthers the 4, the Rams the 5 seed, the Niners the 6 seed, and the Packers the 7 seed. So the playoffs coming in, the playoffs starting this weekend on Saturday through Monday. Pittsburgh will face the Houston Texans. The Steelers will face the Houston Texans on Monday night in Pittsburgh. They face them in Pittsburgh on Monday night. I'll make my picks about the games on Friday, but the Steelers play the Texans on Monday night in Pittsburgh. On Saturday, January 10th, the Rams will play the Panthers at Carolina in a rematch from the regular season. Later on, the Packers will play the Bears in round 3 in Chicago in the NFC North. In their rivalry, this will be the second time they've met in the playoffs overall. The last time, of course, famously, as we all know, was the 2010 NFC Championship game. That was the Jay Cutler injury, and everyone was going crazy about that. And there was, of course, the B.J. Raji interception that everyone remembers and talks about. But so this will be their third matchup of the season and their second time in the playoffs on Sunday. Bills at Jaguars, Niners at Eagles, Chargers at the Patriots, and of course on Monday night, Texans at the Steelers. So that is your NFL playoff bracket and your Super Wild Card weekend. Your wild card weekend this weekend, the top seeds, of course, being the Seahawks and the Broncos. My Super Bowl pick right now, as we head into the playoffs, the Philadelphia Eagles will match up against the Denver Broncos. That is my Super Bowl prediction right now before the playoffs begin. I got the Philadelphia Eagles making it back to the Super Bowl against the Denver Broncos. So let's talk a little baseball. So that's just my NFL playoff preview. Let's talk a little baseball. Let's talk about the New York Mets. A lot of things going on with the Mets, of course. I haven't really touched about the Mets lately because there's so much going on with the NFL. But to talk about the New York Mets. So the Mets recently, again, they're in on Framber Valdez. They're in on Kyle Tucker. They're in on Cody Bellinger. They're in on everything. They're in on all these people. They checked in on this guy. They checked in on this guy. Reports are obviously out that the Mets see more versatility in Cody Bellinger, but they have looked at Kyle Tucker recently. Jim Duquette said that the Mets, Dodgers, and Blue Jays are the most aggressive suitors for Kyle Tucker. He says that nothing is imminent, but there is some distance between the other team and probably interested in the main three. Then there was ESPN, then there was Buster Only that says it seems inevitable that the Mets will sign now. We've heard from Buster. Now, we Met fans know that Buster Only's word is, George Springer and farm, if you know what I mean. But he even says that Framber Valdez and Ranger Suarez, he says it seems inevitable that the Mets will at least get one of those two guys. The Mets, of course, are talking to Framber Valdez. It seems to be, and they definitely seem to be more linked to Kyle Tucker than, say, Cody Bellinger right now. Even though Bellinger would make the most sense for the New York Mets, he would make the most sense because he's more versatile. He can play right field, he can play left field, he can play center field, he can play first base, he could be the DH. Kyle Tucker is more strictly an outfielder. He would definitely fill in the hole in left field. But obviously, Bellinger, it seems to me, the Yankees and Bellinger seems to be at odds. The Yankees have made a second offer to Bellinger, but again, we'll see. Bellinger seems to be asking for a lot of money right now, and if I'm the Mets or the Yankees, whatever, I'm not giving him a lot of money. I think he's a good player, but I'm not overpaying for him. I might overpay for Kyle Tucker because he's a really good player when he's on and healthy. But Bellinger, I think, is going to end up back with the Yankees, but he would certainly make the most sense for the Mets because he has that versatility. But then again, I don't know if his, in terms of his versatility on the field, first base, outfield, DH, but I don't know if his hitting and offense will translate well to Citi Field. I don't know. He is perfect for Yankee Stadium. He's perfect for the Yankees. He's perfect for that right field porch. Kyle Tucker, if the Mets were to sign him, I think he would fit more at Citi Field as an offense with his bat, obviously, than, say, what Bellinger would at Citi Field. But obviously the Mets' big priority is pitching. The Mets need starting pitching. Pitching. And the Mets, of course, have yet to really make a big splash in the starting pitching market. They've been really focused on the bullpen. They've got Jorge Polanco, but they really haven't been able to find still any sort of starting pitching. The starting pitching market has been very slow. Tatsuya Omai recently signed with the Houston Astros, but Yakamoto signed with the Toronto Blue Jays. Offense, obviously the hitter, but still. But the pitching market has been relatively slow. The trade market's been even relatively slow. And the Mets, of course, we've known are trying to at least get into the pitcher market in terms of trades. They've been in on Edmund Cabrera, maybe even Sandy Alcantara from the Miami Marlins. They've, of course, been in on San Diego Padres with Mason Miller in terms of the closer spot. because they still need a closer. They still need really to fill out. They still need that one big piece of the bullpen. But if I'm the Mets, I think, are going to be looking for Kyle Tucker, and I think they're going to be looking at starting pitching. That's what it looks like to me. The Mets are trying to at least land Kyle Tucker and maybe one starting pitcher. So, and they really need that. They really need a big bat in the middle of the order, definitely in the outfield, obviously, and they need a frontline starting pitcher. So, obviously, the Mets are still trying to figure things out, still trying to figure out what long-term deal. The Mets, we keep hearing that the Mets don't want to do long-term deals. Kyle Tucker seems to be looking for a long-term deal. Bellinger definitely is looking for a long-term deal, but maybe the Mets pump out a long-term deal just to get a guy. Maybe they are able to get a short-term deal. We'll see. But again, they're in competition with some of these teams. And again, you hear the teams, right? It's the Dodgers. Hello, Dodgers. How you doing? You already took Edwin Diaz, but the Dodgers in on Kyle Tucker. The Blue Jays are in on Kyle Tucker. The Mets, of course, are still in it for him. The Yankees have been in touch with him. Framber Valdez, you've seen a lot of teams in on him. Ranger Suarez, I think, would be a good get. Ketel Marte is still out there in free agency if a team wants him. Ketel Marte is still out there in free agency if a team wants him. For a trade if a team wants him. Excuse me. Ketel Marte is still out there for a trade if a team's looking to trade for him. So the Mets need to really, again, there's only 6 more weeks left until spring training. We're in early January, about to hit mid-January. Spring training is right around the corner. The Mets need to start feeling some pieces if they especially want to compete next season. If they do decide to really compete next year. If not, could be a transition year where they look at guys like Carson Bench and such. I think Carson Bench right now is the favorite to be the starting center fielder next year. I think he is the favorite to be the starting center fielder. But who is the left fielder? Who knows? Who's the left fielder? Who knows? But I think the Mets are trying to look at to either get one of Kyle Tucker or Bellinger and then try to get a starting pitcher like Valdez or Suarez or Cabrera, etc. Because those are the two things they really need right now. They also need a closer, or someone to at least solidify the bullpen. But maybe the Mets are comfortable rolling with Devin Williams. Again, Devin Williams is someone that, of course, had great success in Milwaukee, had great success with David Stearns with the Brewers. Maybe David Stearns is confident with him as the closer. But really, their big needs are still outfield, the bat in the lineup, and frontline and a starting pitcher. And a frontline starting pitcher to at least give you something there. So, but that's been the Mets offseason again. That's been the latest about what's going on with the Mets. Again, a lot to figure out still. They made some moves, obviously, with Devin and Luke and Polanco, but there's still a lot of moves to be made before spring training, especially if they want to compete next year. So, again, lots going on, lots happening around. Let's take a look at, again, the NFL. I guess we'll go back to the NFL very briefly. Obviously, the coaching stuff going on. The Raiders have requested the Browns QB coach Davis Webb for an interview. Teams obviously looking for an interview. Travis Kelce may or may not be retiring. We don't know about that. I mentioned this earlier in the broadcast. Carnell Tate the Ohio State wide receiver declare for the 2026 draft. That is a big name to watch out for come draft day. Obviously, some of the Commanders coaching staffs are being looked at. There was a report about the Ravens of Cliff Kingsbury. Maybe the Ravens might bring in Cliff Kingsbury for a visit. I guess I'll give you guys my personal pick for the Ravens head coach, who I think the Ravens should hire, Kevin Stefanski. I think he's perfect. I don't know if a rookie. I'm not a big fan of Cliff Kingsbury as a head coach. Offensive coordinator, absolutely, but a head coach, I don't know. But Kevin Stefanski is a really good head coach. He's, I think, that kind of veteran, young, fresh head coach that can give you a fresh voice and be a really good offensive coach and help out Lamar. He's obviously coach of the year winner, been to the playoffs a couple of times, did it with two different quarterbacks with Baker Mayfield and Joe Flacco off the couch at almost 40 years old. But now he would and there was a disaster with the Deshaun Watson situation. And then so you put him in Baltimore, put him with the Ravens. I think he could really flourish and do well. So he would be the guy that I would hope the Ravens hire. But again, we'll see. There's other candidates like Jesse Minter, I guess Kingsbury, Anthony Weaver, former Raven, of course, from his playing days, and now used to coach with the Ravens, and now he's defense coordinator of the Texans and the Dolphins. He's obviously an interesting candidate. Brian Flores would be an interesting candidate, of course. So we'll see where the Ravens go. But my pick would be Stefanski. My guy would be Stefanski. But obviously the Commanders, our coaching staffs are in high demand. Kirk Cousins actually requested. Kirk Cousins and the Falcons restructured his contract. He will likely be a June 1st release. So Kirk Cousins will be available on the market for a team, to sign. And I could see the Jets picking him up. I could definitely see the Jets picking him up. They could draft a quarterback with the number 2 overall pick, and then you sign maybe, or before that or so, you sign Kirk Cousins, and you can bridge that from Kirk to the rookie. So Kirk Cousins, I think, would be a good fit for the New York Jets. Other head coaching interviews. The Cardinals requested an interview with Patriots passing coordinator Thomas Brown. The Browns requested an interview with Seahawks defensive coordinator Adam Dunn. Another guy, of course, from the Seahawks is Clint Kubiak. Very interesting to see what goes on there with him with the Seahawks. He's going to be in it a lot for coaching candidacy. The Titans interviewed Jason Garrett for a head coaching job. Okay. Okay. So Kevin Stefanski, of course, is looking at the Giants job, the Titans job. So a lot going on. The Lions fired the offensive coordinator, John Morton. So John Morton gets 1 year as offensive coordinator after he replaced Ben Johnson, and that's it. So 1 year for John Morton, and he's been fired. The Cardinals and the Raiders are requesting interviews with Clint Kubiak. Obviously, he's going to be a hot coaching candidate throughout the offseason and once the Seahawks season is over. Alabama offensive lineman Caden Proctor declared for the draft. So, again, a lot going on. Obviously, the huge story again today is the firing of John Harbaugh by the Baltimore Ravens. So we'll be back on Friday to talk more about this. I'll give you my picks for the wild card weekend and any of the news and stuff that we hear about coming in throughout the NFL, Major League Baseball, and the NBA and stuff like the AHL and stuff like that. We'll talk about, of course, if there are, of course, more stuff going on, more stuff we hear about the Ravens and Harbaugh's relationship and the coaches that they'll hire. We'll be back to talk about that. Other coaching hires that are interviews that are going on. So we'll be back on Friday to talk a lot more about that. Obviously, we didn't get much. We'll talk about wrestling very quickly. There's so much going on. We'll talk about wrestling very quickly. I thought yesterday's Raw was very good. Didn't really get a chance to watch NXT tonight, but we do have a new NXT North American champion in Izzy Dame. Tatum Paxley beat Izzy Dame, but then they did an angle with Blake Monroe and Blake Monroe and Thea Hale, where Blake Monroe attacked Thea Hale from behind before their championship match. Blake Monroe got banned from the arena. Interesting note, Blake Monroe is scheduled to debut on the main roster very soon, so who knows, maybe it's next week or so, or at the Rumble. But it looks like they're going to use this whole thing with Blake and Thea, where Blake accidentally lost the title because she got the wind knocked out of her on the move, and they counted to 3, and she actually lost the North American Championship to Thea. Looks like they could be using that just to get her to the main roster, which, honestly, fine by me. She was ready for the main roster the second she signed. So, but they did that, and then later on, Thea Hale came out for a open challenge, and it was originally like it was going to be Tatum Paxley, but then that turned out to be Izzy Dame, and Izzy Dame wins the North American Championship. Jordan Grace, look at that, about an hour ago, has officially been called up to the main roster as announced tonight, so we'll see where Jordan Grace is going. I assume both her and Blake Monroe will be heading to SmackDown. They need it. And this is interesting. Again, I'm scrolling through it right now, just seeing it right now, because, again, I didn't really see much of NXT tonight. But Obafemi defeated Leon Slater and left the NXT Championship in the ring and walked out. Meaning, sounds like that championship is vacated because Big Obafemi is on his way to the main roster. So it looks like that championship is vacated. The NXT title is vacated. And it looks like he's on his way to the main roster. So the Raw and SmackDown, if you've been watching the last few weeks, have done a lot of vignettes for him. And obviously the company sees a lot of big things in him. So it looks like this was his last night on NXT. He wins his main event match against Leon Slater, and he left the title in the ring and walked out, which means he's on his way to the main roster. JC Jane retained her NXT Women's Championship tonight, but there has also been discussions that she's going to be called up to the main roster as well. Again, SmackDown. I keep saying SmackDown for a lot of these guys, for a lot of these wrestlers, because boy, SmackDown could use it, especially when you're 3 hours now. Speaking of the 3-hour SmackDown show of last Friday, that was a pretty good show. It was a good show on Friday. I thought it was good, but still they need a lot. They need a lot right now. They need a lot on SmackDown. We saw the return of Randy Orton and such, but they still need, and we saw some NXT guys, but again, they need a lot. SmackDown needs a lot. So, but that was the gist of NXT tonight. So a new North champion on the women's side in Izzy Dame and Obafemi. Tate actually beat Izzy before in the opener of the show. He retained his championship, but it looks like he vacated it and left it in the ring and walked out, which means he's heading to the main roster. Monday Night Raw last night, the 1 hour show, the big anniversary show about 1 year since Netflix, all that stuff. I thought was good. I thought Braun and Punk were the highlights. They had, I thought, a really good, fun main event. Turns of the big championships. Rhea and Io were the tag team champions. They defeated the Kabuki Warriors in a fun match. Becky Lynch won the IC title back from Maxine Dupree in a very match, but she's the new Intercontinental champion again. Be very interesting to see what the direction is there, because we built Maxine up for the last month and a half or so just to have her drop the belt back to Becky. So what's the deal with her? And is Becky Lynch, AJ Lee going to be the big feud for the Intercontinental Championship heading to WrestleMania and such? So we'll see. But I thought it was interesting that Becky beat Maxine for the title, and then Punk and Braun, really good match. CM Punk did defeat Braun Breaker to retain the championship, and I thought it was a really fun match. A lot of shenanigans that you'd expect. The Vision came out. I think it was Ray, Dragon Lee, and Penta that came out and assisted Punk with the Vision. There was a referee bump. Paul Heyman even took a bump. There was some really sick bumps by both Punk and Braun Breaker. Braun Breaker again was just a wrecking ball. There was the rough bump that he took where he looked like he slipped on the ropes trying to do the Frankensteiner, and he unfortunately landed on his head again. He made it through the match. Thankfully, the rest of the way he seemed okay. So that was good. He looked okay. But him and Punk and Braun had a very good match, but it ended with, they told a very good story. Punk being the savvy veteran, right? This is kind of how they've told these matches with Punk recently, where he's faced the younger talents. They told a similar story against Gunther at SummerSlam, which again was a very good match. And they kind of told this again with Braun Breaker, where Braun's the young, present, he's the guy, he's the, he's the one with all the, all the the edge and everything like that, all the youth and everything, all the speed and everything like that, quickness and power. But Punk has got brain. Punk is the veteran. He's still the one with the experience. He's the world champion, right? And they did a great job telling the story. And I love that there were even moments where Punk was surprised that he couldn't beat Braun. There was oh my God, what am I going to do to beat this guy? He's, and I actually gave you as a fan kind of oh, is Braun going to win? So they did a great job telling that story. And it ends with Punk outsmarting Braun. Braun goes for the spear. Punk gets out of the way. He knees him. And then he gives him the GTS, second GTS for the 1, 2, 3. Braun kicked out of one GTS. Interesting, Braun didn't hit the spear on Punk in this match. So, but Punk did take two GTSs to beat. It did take two GTSs to beat Braun Breaker, and Punk retains the championship. So that was a very good match. Another thing that happened on the show was Gunther and AJ Styles having a segment with each other, and that is going to lead to a match next Monday night. Not the Rumble or WrestleMania. No, next Monday night will be, I assume the main event will be AJ Styles versus Gunther one-on-one. So that'll be an interesting match to watch to see who goes over in that one. Then there was Stephanie Vaquer. Stephanie Vaquer was injured. She had a boot on. I think she got hurt either last Monday during the triple threat or so, but she had a boot. It doesn't look too serious. Doesn't look like she should be out for long, but they did do an injury. She didn't vacate the championship or anything, but she did have an injury angle of sorts with Raquel Rodriguez. Raquel beat her down. So it looks like that feud is continuing with Raquel and with Stephanie Vaquer, but it looks like Vaquer could be out of action for at least a couple of weeks. So hopefully she's okay. And hey, that's another injury that the company has now. Obviously, Dom Mysterio, who's the current Intercontinental Champion, he's dealing with an injury right now. He was not on TV at all yesterday. Liv Morgan, speaking of the Judgment Day, made her television return. She beat Lyra Valkyria in a match in the win over Lyra Valkyria. So obviously, but the show I thought was pretty. So I thought the show overall was good, headlined by a really good main event. And So on Friday, we'll speak more about SmackDown, 3-hour SmackDown after their show last night. That saw Cody after their show last week, their first 3-hour show. And this Friday night, the main event is Cody versus Drew for the world title. And we'll see what happens there. I think Cody wins. I think Cody wins and retains, but we'll see. But that's going to be it for the show. It's for today on MazzaOnSports. Like I said, went very long. There was a lot to talk about, a lot to get into. But we'll be back on Friday to talk more about the Ravens and their head coaching search and all the head coaches searches going around. We'll preview the NFL playoffs. We'll talk AEW and we'll talk SmackDown. So thank you guys so much for tuning in and listening. I greatly appreciate it. Have yourselves a great night and take care.